Nina, thank you so much from the entire Webit team. And of course, we shall continue innovating. If we stop innovating, we will die. And I'm sure this is the motto and the theme of all the global Webit community members, which we have over 100,000 with us today. Our next host and moderator is also a dear friend of Webit for a long time, correspondent and presenter at Forbes Italia. Angela, such a pleasure to have you with us. The floor is yours.
Hello and welcome to this Global Impact Week, Webit Global Impact Week. Today our topic is global impact of the economic growth during the pandemic and the role of sustainability. We have a panel of three wonderful female leaders. Olga Algayerova, Executive Secretary of the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. Welcome, Olga. Lilyana Pavlova, Vice President and member of the Management Committee at European Investment Bank. And welcome, Lilyana. And Maria-Francesca Spatolisano, Assistant Secretary General for Policy Coordination and Interagency Affairs at UNDESA and Officer in Charge at the Office of the Envoy on Technology at United Nations. Welcome, Maria-Francesca. Thank you all for being with us today. As we said, we are going to talk about impact of the economic growth during the pandemic and the role of sustainability. And I would like to start with just giving a quick overview of our guests. So I would like to introduce, our guest, Lilyana Pavlova, Vice President, member of the Management Committee at European Investment Bank, and Lilyana was previously a member of the National Assembly of the Republic of Bulgaria, Minister for the Bulgarian Presidency of the Council of the European Union, and Minister of Regional Development and Public Works for 2 mandates. So the other guests, Maria-Francesca Spatolisano, Assistant Secretary General for Policy Coordination, Interagency Affairs at UNDESA, and Officer in Charge, Office of the Envoy on Technology, United Nations. She was previously as the European Ambassador to the OECD, and UNESCO, Monaco and Andorra. While Olga Algayerova, actually Executive Secretary at United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. She started work in this role in 2017, and she has been previously permanent representative of Slovakia to the international organizations in Vienna and Austria, State Secretary, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So very, very, very interesting bios. I would like to start asking the questions to Lilyana Pavlova. Lilyana, thank you for being with us, and tell me, do you think policymakers in the EU and worldwide realize the scale of the climate task ahead of them, the huge amount of work to be done by 2030?
Thank you very much for this question. First of all, dear Olga, dear Maria, I'm really glad to join this extremely and 100% female-led debate and panel as part of the Global Impact Week, which is indeed a great pleasure and opportunity to have 100% female-led discussion. And now directly to your question, yes, I do believe that we all realize the huge work and investment that is required to achieve our targets. And that is why I strongly believe that the European Council and the European member states back in 2019, when the global European decision and solution on how to provide EU response also asked the European Investment Bank to strengthen its role as EU Climate Bank, and also to support the European Green Deal in accelerating the transition to carbon neutral and climate resilient economy by 2050. And I believe we reacted quite swiftly, and in our board we have approved our Climate Bank roadmap, which sets in detail on how we are going as EU Climate Bank to support carbon neutral, climate resilient, and environmental sustainable economy. And this plan, which our climate bank roadmap, is really strongly supporting the green recovery and fully backing the European Green Deal, including its just transition. Because this is a very important element of this, really supporting countries in need inside but also outside EU for a fair and just transition. What we are committing to is to mobilize, for this our plan is to mobilize 1 trillion euro of investments in climate action and environmental sustainability in this critical decade till 2030, and to dedicate more than 50% of our lending, which annually is approximately 70 billion euro, to this specific lending in support of this transition. And I should say, we are the first multilateral development bank to be fully Paris aligned from this year. But yet the volume is not the only important requirement, I should say, if we want to be successful in supporting this global target, because we have to also focus on quality of the investments we do and on their impact, because these are really the important questions which we need carefully to analyze. So in combating climate change and also green and digital recovery, of course, innovation and sustainable investments are really in the center, and this is where we have to provide really the main support. And that is why I'm really happy to announce that, of course, EIB as EU Climate Bank, we participated in Glasgow in COP26, where we have announced 2 very important deliverables in support to climate ambitions. First is our new framework for Paris alignment for counterparties, and second is our new adaptation plan. Maybe in few words, simply to explain. So the new framework for Paris alignment of counterparts is really it's really important to support companies to develop a strong, bankable and sustainable projects, because it's just to give you an example, we cannot support a company to develop a low carbon project if at the same time company intends, for example, to develop highly carbon intensive project, like supporting mining company installing solar panels. It doesn't work at all. So this is the new approach which we are establishing in supporting and the business, the governments in achieving long-term decarbonization. Adaptation, second element, because key aspect of climate change, of supporting this transition, is adaptation. Because we have to increase our investments in adaptation, we need to adapt all infrastructure, roads, railways, also hospitals, really to be agile and to increase, to be protected, to follow the process of adaptation, to withstand frequent and most intense, for example, extreme weather events, to protect territories from flood protection, also coastal area protection, and many others, just as an example. So maybe to conclude, yes, I strongly believe that all policymakers at European level, at national level, all us international financial institutions, we understand how huge this ambition is. It is that we need to be well coordinated, and there is a lot of work ahead of us. And only if we are well aligned globally and coordinated, we can achieve these goals.
And the next question, in this case, I would like to speak about the green transition. It requires an involvement of all stakeholders and a wide change in mindset for the whole society. What do you see as the particular role of the private and public sector in contributing to the green transition?
First of all, I should start by saying that climate change is more than a European issue. It's not a European issue solely, because first of all, it's a human issue, and it's a global challenge, because Europe accounts for less than 10% of global emissions. So we need to transform the way our economies work by investing heavily in new technologies and in skills and in infrastructure, all entailing climate mitigation and climate adaptation, because we have to replace lost jobs with some new jobs, sustainable and socially inclusive jobs. In order to make this happen, we need the involvement of both public and private stakeholders, because also this close cooperation, which I mentioned before, is of critical importance. And that is why Horizon Europe is as initiative, as facility, is really key to enable this increased investment in climate mitigation, and also different initiatives which we all undertake. We need to ensure complementarity with the private sector investment, and working together and in solidarity, in partnership, if we want to achieve this and to maximize this global impact which we want to achieve, because it's not only about achieving target in Europe, but it's really to be spread around and to partner with other countries. So what we can offer as multilateral, as international financial institution, which we are operating in more than 100 countries, not only inside the EU, apparently globally, is also not only to provide the financing, the lending and financing, but what we are ready to provide is a tailor-made technical and financial advisory support to governments, to cities, to regions, to our counterparts, and to project promoters, in order for them to be able to build a strong pipeline of projects which are relevant for the purpose globally. And here I would just want to mention one important element, the element of financial instruments, because normally we have to try to get rid of this, as I call it, dependence on grants. Combination really, and reorganizing the way grant funding and lending from different sources and national resources are combined or blended will help us to mobilize first private sector co-investing with the public authorities. Second, will help us to make the use of the funds much more efficient, because financial instruments, when we combine grants and loans, and we establish a financial instrument in providing support in financing projects, they will have a revolving nature of these funds. And then with the repayments, we can reinvest and maximize the effects of the funding we have available. So with this, we have the leverage effect, and we will attract the private financiers to take higher risk if we provide them de-risking financing activities. Also, as I mentioned, technical assistance and really in the direction of moving away from grant dependency and providing more incentives to attracting private sector to have better performance, to have projects which are viable and which will have the necessary impact which we are looking for.
And another question is mostly about innovation. Innovation is a key driver of growth, and not only in the field of digitalization, artificial intelligence, or blockchain. What do you think is needed by the EU and by the United Nations, so on a global scale, to bridge the gap with the leaders?
Innovation, as we know it, is not homogeneous, even though it might seem so, because breakthrough technologies are not spontaneous, so you cannot cherry pick them. The innovation and the breakthrough technologies are rather a mixture of good ideas, hard work, and well-tailored finance. So yet you can find entrepreneurs aiming to create new technological unicorn nearly in every corner of the world. But the market reality is that there are plenty of ideas, but only a handful have a chance to survive and to become so successful. But once they do, they can really make a difference in how they could transform the way we work, the way we live, and also helping us on the grief pathway. So I think there are two main elements of well-defined innovation finance agenda, which could help viable ideas overcome the valley of death, as we say. And they both aim at investing in ecosystems, and of course both come from our EIB's toolkit. First is, since we have scarce public resources, we need to be able to create sufficient platforms for co-investing with private sector, and really to fully exploit the potential of capital markets. We as a bank has a strong track record in this. To date, we have made a very detailed analysis showing that every €1 of our green financing is associated with some €4 of additional finance from other sources. So one of the novel instruments, which will definitely continue to play an important role in mobilizing private resources, of course, is green bonds. We pioneered as bank the green bonds back in 2007. Now they're still very high on the agenda. We have recently expanded our eligibilities of the climate awareness bonds to also to finance research and development and innovation, and of course low carbon transport projects and different projects in order to have this different. Second, which perhaps might sound paradoxically, innovation is not all about money, because confidence comes from predictability, and predictability comes from good and well-prepared projects. So you cannot overestimate the value of a good advice from that respect. And that is why really providing investment assistance and support is really much needed. And we are proud of having our in-house technical and financial advisory support, which we can deliver in support of this kind of investment. So just to conclude in one sentence, I think it's the critical moment in our history to catalyze the green revolution and green innovations in green innovations. So green revolution won't succeed without innovation, and this is the I should say the only right way forward.
It is my pleasure to join you online from the United Nations headquarters in New York at this Global Impact Week of the Webit. Indeed, this is an important discussion of the global impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on economic growth, and I am honored to be able to contribute to this dialogue. Question 1, assessment of whether policymakers in the EU and worldwide realize the scale of the climate tasks ahead of them. Huge amount of work to be done in 2030. How are the UN, UNECE, and EIB and other international and governmental organizations supporting a carbon neutral economy? COP26 served as an important reminder in terms of how far the world still needs to go to meet net zero by 2050. The needle is moving, but not nearly fast enough. Nations' revised emissions pledges represent great progress and should not be dismissed lightly. But truth is, this would still enable highly dangerous warming levels. Capitalizing on green investment opportunities and mobilizing green financing are absolutely key to deliver on both the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the Paris Agreement on climate change. The UN system, as well as multilateral development banks such as the EIB, are at the forefront of helping mobilize climate finance at all levels. In the wake of COP26, we need to move expeditiously to get to the long-promised 100 billion a year to the developing world. And we need to reach a 50-50 split between funding for emissions cuts and funding for adaptation. Question 2. The green transition requires an involvement of all stakeholders and a wide change in mindset of the whole society, business, politics, individuals. What do you see as the particular role of the private and public sector in driving or contributing to the green transition? Indeed, a close partnership between the public and private sectors will be essential if we are to succeed. A scale-up of green investments can not only help address climate change, but also foster economic growth and job creation. Nevertheless, public spending alone will not suffice to finance the green transformation. The majority of investment must come from the private sector. It is therefore important to align the financial system, banking, capital markets, and insurance with sustainable development. The COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated the debt pressure of many countries, putting a considerable strain on their financial resources. At the same time, market uncertainty and volatility in financial markets due to the crisis have made investors more risk-averse, reducing the amount of capital available, for example, for renewable energy projects in developing countries. The predictability and reliability of policies and regulations is therefore a vital consideration for attracting investors, as it reduces risks related to policy reversals or renegotiations. In this regard, governments have a key role to play in the establishment of stable and coherent policy and regulatory frameworks, in turn stimulating investment from the private sector. Question 3. Innovation is a key driver of growth, notably, but not only, in the field of digitalization, artificial intelligence, blockchain, and will be decisive in the coming years. What is needed by the EU and on a global scale at the UN to bridge the gap with the leaders? The world must leverage and make the best use of technological innovations to meet the most urgent needs of its growing population. Harnessing the potential of the digital transformation will require investments in modern infrastructure, going hand in hand with building human capacity. Countries must also build and strengthen their national innovation systems to support a faster pace of discovery and adoption of new technologies by the private sector. In many countries, the regulatory frameworks must also be modernized so that they do not hamper progress and they protect individuals against possible misuses and abuses. Technological breakthroughs can be, and often are, double-edged swords. Technologies can depress job growth in the short term and widen income and wealth inequality if left to themselves. Therefore, there is growing awareness and acceptance that technological innovation must be managed and regulated, keeping in mind that the most vulnerable, who are least able to pay for their basic needs. The efficiency gains and cost reduction must translate to affordability and improved access for those who are otherwise most likely to be left behind. So how can the global community help bridge the technology gap among countries? The greatest challenge for countries during this period of rapid digital transformation is finding ways to encourage investment in new technologies, new markets, and new business models that, together with skilling people, set the conditions for longer-term success, more and higher-paying jobs. Developing countries have the most to benefit from the greater use of technology, as periods of rapid change open the doors for new competitors. But these countries are also the most challenged by a lack of the necessary investments, skills, and infrastructure to realize this potential at a large scale. The rush into digital and frontier technologies should also not blindside that many countries and societies are yet to enjoy some basic technologies, electricity or sanitation, that we take for granted. A more effective and supportive international cooperation is needed to ensure that technologies are available to all people in all countries. Countries can choose to work together to set international norms and standards, facilitate technology transfers, ensure fair market competition, and promote effective tax cooperation in order to foster development and diffusion of frontier technologies. A key challenge is how to deal with the growing mistrust and even fear of where these technologies are taking us. Governments, the technical community, investors, and users must put our shared universal values at the center of design, development, and deployment decisions around these technologies. We must ensure that we are guided not simply by the dictators of the market or the needs of national security, but also by our moral compass. In other words, we must be responsible risk takers. We must proceed with our eyes wide open so that it is we that use technology and not technology that uses us. Public policy and technology must work together, not against each other. We must chart a path guided by our shared values. The UN's role in the future design, development, and deployment of technologies is, we must be clear, a humble one. It is for governments and societies, not for the UN itself, to determine how they wish to manage the cost and benefits of these technologies. But the UN is uniquely positioned to facilitate global dialogues and common outcomes, and forge commitments to ensure that digital technologies work for all. We must also ensure digital technologies are aligned with the values enshrined in the UN Charter, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and the norms and standards of international laws. The Secretary General of the United Nations has traced the roadmap for digital cooperation and proposed to work towards a global digital compact in 2023. Question 5, how to ensure that sustained growth and sustainable growth can be achieved simultaneously in the context of COVID recovery? The GDP growth rate had already been slowing for much of the world prior to the pandemic. Among the 46 least developed countries, the LDCs, only six managed to achieve a sustained gross domestic product growth rate at or above 7% per annum during 2013-2019. Even before the pandemic, the world was not on track to meet the goal of decoupling economic growth from unsustainable resource use. Going forward, as the pandemic lingers, the immediate outlook for growth will depend at first on how quickly vaccines are made available to all countries and how quickly these vaccines are administered. Looking beyond the immediate crisis, achieving sustained and sustainable growth, as called for in SDG 8, requires a realignment of the policy priorities to focus on economic diversification and accelerating a green transition in all sectors. Countries must actively plan for and invest in these transitions, which have the potential to generate jobs and generate stable, long-term growth pathways. These must be accompanied by initiatives to build human capital and adopt new technologies. Investment in education, training, science and technology, and research and development, among other strategic areas, need to be emphasized. International cooperation is also essential to ensure that developing countries are not left behind, and the green transition happens simultaneously across the entire world in order to truly benefit the global commons, such as the ocean and climate. The common agenda put forward by the United Nations Secretary General is meant to accelerate the progress towards the 2030 agenda in an open, multi-stakeholder approach.
Colleagues, friends, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to start by expressing my gratitude to the Webit Foundation for the organization of this panel and the opportunity to address you today. The impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on economic growth is evident to all of us. Millions around the world have fallen into poverty. GDPs have contracted. Trade has decreased. Governments have instituted recovery plans to kickstart economic growth. And too often, these are short-sighted and do not consider anything beyond the immediate future. We need a change. The United Nations Secretary General has identified recovery from COVID as an opportunity to create more sustainable, resilient, and inclusive societies. We don't have to go back to our old habits. By aligning rebuilding efforts with the 2030 Agenda and its 17 Sustainable Development Goals, we can indeed build forward better. And of course, perhaps the biggest challenge in achieving the 2030 Agenda is that of climate change. We are far, far from meeting the targets of the Paris Agreement. We have witnessed extraordinary weather events this year. Signs point to much worse to come. Major obstacles to serious action on climate are the economic and social consequences of a green transition for communities dependent on the existing fossil-based system for their welfare. The UNECE region covers North America, all of Europe, Turkey, Israel, and the countries of the former Soviet Union. In 2015, the share of fossil energy in the UNECE region was 80%. As of 2020, it was 82% of a bigger energy pie. Many countries in the region simply don't have the finances or the technological capacity to undertake a significant reformulation of the energy mix at this stage. So we need a two-pronged approach. One, we need to mobilize greater amounts of financing to enable climate action. And two, we need to use all the means at our disposal to address the current situation, including in countries where fossil fuels are still a major share of the energy mix. I'm happy to say that UNECE can help in both of these contexts. UNECE is a multilateral platform, facilitates economic integration and cooperation among its member states via policy dialogue, development of regulations, norms and legal instruments, exchange of best practices and technical cooperation for countries with economies in transition. A significant advantage is that our multilateral platform allows us to address two significant dimensions of climate change: the transboundary aspect and the cross-sectoral aspect. Transboundary action is absolutely necessary because neither pollution nor the effects of climate change stop at national borders. Countries must coordinate. Meanwhile, actions taken in one sector can affect others. The transport sector affects the environment due to GHG emissions from vehicles, and the water sector affects the food system, as the availability of fresh water is critical to agriculture. UNECE's climate change mitigation work therefore targets cross-cutting transboundary areas to reduce emissions reductions. For example, international cooperation on national commitments under UNECE's Air Convention have helped to significantly cut air pollutants in 51 countries across Europe and North America. Or we promote significant reductions in GHG emissions from transport through more stringent UN regulations on vehicle emissions and facilitating the availability of greener fuel sources. Or, as we know, buildings represent 40% of combustion-related CO2 emissions in developed countries. UNECE's framework guidelines for the energy performance of buildings help lower this amount. Local authorities, trade associations, and academic institutions are but some of the stakeholders we have partnered with to help disseminate and implement these guidelines. Everybody has a role to play. Or also, UNECE has identified methane management as a critical part of addressing climate change. Methane is a powerful greenhouse gas, therefore there is a large potential for GHG emissions this way, and cost-effective mitigation technologies are readily available. Our best practice guidance for effective methane management in the oil and gas sector is a very popular tool that helps countries to reduce the carbon footprint of their fossil fuel use. We also work on blockchain-based methods to promote greater sustainability in garment and footwear value chains, and also to reduce food loss and waste. Ladies and gentlemen, these are but a few examples from our normative work. I hope it gives you an idea of how the UN can support countries' efforts towards a green transition with standards, recommendations, and best practices. I mentioned climate finance as a second prong. As discussed at COP26, billions of dollars are needed to finance the required investments in sustainable infrastructure. Governments also cannot raise this money. We absolutely need the private sector. Here also, UNECE is a big proponent of using standards, norms, and legal instruments to create suitable conditions for investment. We partner with international financial institutions to integrate the principles of public participation and environmental impact assessment in the climate-related investment projects in the region. Our Convention on Access to Information, Public Participation in decision-making and access to justice in environmental matters, or shortly Aarhus Convention, as well as the Convention on Environmental Impact Assessment in a transboundary context, shortly named ESPO Convention, set out obligations to assess the environmental impact of certain activities early in the planning process. These norms are routinely used by multilateral development banks in the UNECE region when considering their investment projects. Another normative tool is UNECE's Convention on the Protection and Use of Transboundary Watercourses and International Lakes. The Water Convention provides a global framework for cooperation between countries on climate change adaptation in shared basins, including sharing knowledge and supporting basins in accessing finance for climate change adaptation. UNECE also supports its member states in identifying information needs and measurement challenges related to climate finance. Green finance products must have mechanisms in place that assist in the selection of projects, but even more importantly, in the collection and verification of related performance information. Here, environmental statistics and other indicators that may be collected as part of other reporting obligations are key. Our 2021 Expert Forum for Producers and Users of Climate Change-related Statistics discussed these information needs and measurement challenges and the role of national statistics offices in addressing them. I really hope I have been able to give you some food for thought regarding the importance of norms, standards, and legal instruments to accelerate action and mobilize climate finance, as well as the necessity of transboundary and cross-sectoral measures and regional cooperation as such. I thank you once again for the opportunity to speak here today.
Thank you so much to Lilyana Pavlova, Vice President and member of the Management Committee at European Investment Bank. Thank you, Lilyana. Thank you, Olga Algayerova, Executive Secretary at United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. Thank you so much, Olga. And thank you to Maria-Francesca Spatolisano, Assistant Secretary General for Policy Coordination and Interagency Affairs, and at UN, the DESA, and Officer in Charge at the Office of the Envoy on Technology at United Nations. Thank you so much, all of you, for being with us. Thank you for being part of this Webit Global Impact Week, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye. Thank you.